is expected there rather, and of course Court 2 SG Francis Atwoli. And if we can all remember, on May 1st last year, the president promised a lot of things to the Kenyan workers, including an increase of a minimum wage by at least 6%, just a move aimed at uplifting the welfare of workers and of course ensuring fair compensation. So even as these celebrations continue, Kenyans will be looking forward to see what the president is going to say today in regards to that. And of course, the president also tasked the Ministry of Labour and Social Protection last year to also operationalize multiple wage councils as outlined in the Labour Relations Act of 2017. And Court 2 SG also welcomed the previous 6% increase, but also emphasized that the president needed to increase something for the Kenyan workers, but at least 22.5%, of course, to just address the rising cost of living and the inflationary pressures. So even as these celebrations will be continuing at Uhuru Gardens, we'll be looking forward to see if at all this will be talked about by the president. Of course, we see taxes have also increased. Others are also coming in. And of course, we had Hipak Said saying earlier that the president has promised that there will be no further taxes. But even as we are battling a higher tax rate, are we really going to see that, or rather a higher budget? Are we really going to see ourselves surviving without more taxes? Or how are we going to survive with such, economic situation? Once again, those are live pictures from Uhuru Gardens, where our team of reporters are on standby, and here as well we are on standby to ensure that we bring you full coverage, full details of what is happening right there at Uhuru Gardens in regards to the Labor Day celebrations. Let's cross over there and take a look at what's happening right about now.
Sound engineer tuweke kwaya ya Nita in the house. Let us put Nita choir in the house. We can't hear them from the main dais. Sound engineer. Sound engineer tuweke Nita choir in the house. Jackson, put the choir in the house. Share the signal. All right, thank you.
All right, those are live pictures from Uhuru Gardens, where the Labor Day celebrations are currently ongoing. And of course, once the event begins officially, we'll be sure to cross over there once again. But right now in studio, we have Ishmael Nyaribo, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. And with all that is said and done by the unionists who have been here this morning, what do you need to know in terms of your rights as an employee? How do you need to protect yourself? When do you need to protect yourself? And why you need to protect yourself at work. And of course, Wakili will be here to just help us with that breakdown, even as we celebrate Labor Day celebrations. And remember to interact with us and tell us what your expectations are in regards to today's celebrations. Karibu sana to studio, Wakili.
Thank you. Asante sana.
Let me begin with, what's on the minds of many Kenyans this Labor Day. We see a lot of job losses, higher taxes, a cost of living that is becoming quite unbearable as well. Do you believe that the current labor laws are existing really are working in the best interest of the Kenyan worker?
Well, largely, yes, the labor law, the Employment Act, and all the other, pieces of legislation that govern workplace, health, and compensation, largely they work. There are a few sections that are still outdated, that are not matching the global trend, but those are, change in progress, and they can be, if a section here or there is outdated and does not address probably, let's say, proper fair practice, what is considered fair, in this part of the world, in Africa and East Africa, for example, might be a practice that is, frowned upon if you go to the Europe and the, Americas. So yes, some sections that would be lagging behind in that respect, there are just a few of them and they can be improved.
Yeah.
But largely, the Employment Act, as amended in 2017 and later, protects the worker, actually. Probably the problem would be, does the worker then know what are his rights, what are her rights? So that, and I think that is largely an issue of both reading and education. I mean, being educated, not in class. I'm talking about the employer allowing the employee to know their rights and showing them that this is your right, this is what you should do. If anybody tells you this is what you ought to do. If you need leave, this is what you need to do. If somebody is discriminating against you because of gender, because of color, or because of ability or disability of your physical, body, then in that sense, these are your rights. So I think it's more or less an issue of, are the workers informed?
So even as much as you say that the Kenyan employer should be in a position to just let their employee know these are your rights, but do you think that they create a space to just let their workers know that...
now you are in the field of economics and revenue and budget and whether you should surrender all your rights as employer so that the employee can have his rights, while as an employer, we have what we call, I think, Federation of Kenya Employers, and there's a whole piece of legislation also governing what employers can do. So the point here, at least an employer must expose an act of parliament and what it stipulates to their employees. You cannot hide. If the question of you need leave, it should be pointed out over there. What is the process of applying for that leave? You need to showcase it over there. In case somebody approaches you and is in a supervisorial level and is trying to intimidate you, for example, into discrimination or harassment at the workplace, what should you do? There should be a whole code pinned on the walls and in all visible places, so that an employee who comes to work, even a young employee or misinformed or less informed employee, is able actually to pick up their rights and they immediately approach the supervisor or the HR so that they can be protected. So I think employers have no reason to hide, except, speaking humanly, when you look at the economics, you don't want the employee to have so much rights and is unmanageable in the workplace. I think those are just what I can call, administrative fears that should not overshadow the rights within the Employment Act.
Yeah, you mentioned about the FKE, of course, the Federation of Kenyan Employer, and they released a report that stated that the employment space remains quite fragile in the country, and of course they say that at least 70,000 formal jobs are lost and have been lost, and a big percentage, about 40% of employees are planning further reduction. That is according to the FKE. And we've seen this in so many industries, even as now in the private sectors as well. So from a legal standpoint, what laws exist and protections for employers are wanapatikana in this mass layoff?
Yeah, again, I will start with the economic side, not in detail, but the issue is I've also seen data that suggests that there are about 150,000 workspaces in the country. I mean, offices, if you wish to call them that, desks or you know, whether it is offices or mechanic places, there are about 150,000 workspaces. But these workspaces or institutions reduce every other month. Why? Because you hear one company has gone away, and then another one has been closed by maybe KRA. Another one has not met this or that standard, has been closed down. So in a year, you find that about 10,000 of those have been closed. That simply means these workers who are in these institutions or offices have been rendered, you know, redundant. They cannot work. Now you're asking, what law then protects them? Definitely it is the Employment Act again. I mean, the Employment Act provides that if you are intending to scale down your workforce, you must inform the workers. You must give them their redundancy. You must prepare them. You must get, you know, counseling for them that you're going to be left. You have to go. And you must show a justification why it is that particular employee who has to be removed and not this other one. And that is a very volatile, you know, very delicate balancing act. Because how do you know who you are? As an employer, of course, you will know that in order to increase output, I have to take away this particular class of employees so that I can remain with this other class. But the employee will not understand it in that sense. Always the employee will imagine that they have been discriminated against. So the law provides for that kind of balance, but the actual decision on who goes and who remains is always delicate, both in the side of employee and in the side of the employer.
So what happens when now an employer does not bring the employee to the table and give them this notice that you're going to, you know, to get rid of you because of 1, 2, 3, you know, and just bypasses these procedures that are available in the Employment Act? What happens in that situation?
Yeah, you know, now that becomes a claim. That's why we have Ministry of Labor. There is a dispute desk at the Ministry of Labor, a whole unit. And then we have labor courts in the country. So I think it is normally encouraged that if, as an employee, you feel that you have unfairly been shown the door, and the employer is claiming redundancy, is claiming, you know, the economy is bad and everything is not working, then of course you approach the Ministry of Labor, and Ministry of Labor, you know, the dispute section, they look at that and ascertain whether indeed you have a claim. And if you feel that, if the Ministry of Labor feels that no, the process used is fair, they will make a decision. That does not stop you from proceeding to the from the Environment and Labor Court. And this is provided for in the Employment Act itself. So then in the Labor Court, and again you lodge your claim, you put down your issues. Why are you feeling that the employer was wrong and the Minister of Labor as well was wrong? The labor officer is a trained person who easily can actually tell whether the employer was right or wrong. And of course, then you proceed to the labor court, and the labor court listens to your claim, because you have to file a claim there, and you say, this is what has happened to me, and I think it should not have happened, and therefore I'm coming to you as a court to give me these solutions. I'm using layman language. But others, you can say, I am praying that you do the following for me. And then the court has to listen to you and has to listen to the employer. And finally, the court has to make a decision. And I believe that decision then should be respected as the final decision. But if you are aggrieved again, you can go all the way to the Court of Appeal and see if your issues can be ironed out there.
Now, even as we talk about, the FKE, and they mentioned some time back that about 45 to 50% of employee salaries are going to deductions and, of course, taxes. This also reducing the take-home pay that a lot of salaried workers are going home with. So how does this align with the labor laws concerning fair compensation?
You see, if we address an issue just in piecemeal, we will get a solution within that bracket. But if you want to handle a situation fully, you look at the big picture. The big picture here is, I mean, where does an employer get money to pay you? This is the germane question. This is the big picture. The employer gets money to pay from the market, from the industry. I mean, what people want, the service people want, we give that service. Once you have given that service to the people, then the people pay back. And once the people pay back, then you get a salary, you get your contract paid, you know, then you are settled. So if the economy of a nation is not working, by the way, it becomes difficult for all other industries to sustain that service delivery, and then how much is coming into the company. All these things depend on whether the economy of a nation is working. So companies can be forced to lay off people, not because they hate them, but because it is not working, because the dynamics behind the office, before they come to the front office for the public to see that a company has closed down, are big. I mean, you have to pay NHIF, you have to pay NSSF, you have to pay KRA, then you have to pay the workers, then you have to pay the shareholders and directors, and then the remaining money, you know, is what you call profit. But people tend to think that once you have an industry and you are working, there is money, you must give me. So the point here is, if the economy is not working, actually the employer has extremely limited space of turning around. The whole issue here is, if the economy is working, even the law can be applied correctly and properly. Because if the law says you ought to pay your workers, isn't it? By the 30th of every month. And then the economy does not provide that. You've seen these things happen. Let me give an example. You've seen these things happen when, for example, the school, the Minister for Education or any other minister says, all people, all students must do exams. Some of these students have not cleared the fees, isn't it? Where does the school get the money? I'm not going to the school issues, but I'm telling you that the industry must be enabled to operate. Once they have operated, then funding is being done by the customers of that particular industry. And then workers are treated correctly. If you look at the workspace health and workspace environment, you come to the workplace. Do you have a place for changing? If, for example, for newborn, you know, for mothers who have young ones, do they have a place where they can breastfeed? All these things are in the law, but a company will be totally in hardship to implement such good rules and laws if it is not enabled, if the economy is collapsed, if they don't have facilities and funds to improve and create those facilities. So
in situations where, for example, the deductions are made by the employer to a level where it exceeds the recommended 1/3. So what recourse does the employee have in such a situation in terms of just if the deduction, the salary deduction exceeds that limit?
You see, and again, think about East Africa, think about Kenya. I mean, there are many people who do that, and the employee, him or herself, decides, it's better I take this rather than going to sit at home or go in the village. So it becomes sort of an arrangement that is actually unlawful, but it is being carried out by the employee and the employer. But an employer should not wait until things have become so bad as to reduce beyond the 1/3. So he should then inform. I mean, this is projections, you know, proper business manners or practice, where you are able to understand that your income in the coming 1 year or 2 years will be so much less that you prepare your employees well in advance. And this has happened. You've seen, we can name several companies in the country that have laid off people. So you cannot reduce your employees' pay to below the limits expected by the law just because you're in hardship. And to avoid that, you've got to have proper projections, you've got to have proper advice, you know, from the market leaders and experts in the industry to tell you that if this is where you are now, definitely you need to inform your employees so that you don't come to a situation where you are doing unlawful things in your company.
We've also seen cases where there are complaints that in a workplace there are people paid, you know, the pay is so different. Somebody could be paid, let's say 20,000, the other person is paid 1 million Kenyan shillings. Is that something that the law protects, or say something about it? Just fair compensation and average compensation?
Yeah, it feels unfair, really, but the law actually protects it. I mean, employment is about a contract. If you come for you go for an interview to a company, they ask you how much you want to earn, and then you say, I want to earn 40,000, and they ask you why you think you deserve 40,000, and then you give your explanation, and there's a whole lot of people there listening to you, and they determine in their judgment, right or wrong. They say, no, this one is saying 40, but we will give her or him 30. And they ask you later, would you consider working if we pay you 30? And you say yes, isn't it? This is a contract. And sometimes this is done wrongly, because these are people who understand your economic situation. They take advantage in asking you such a question. But when you find these other people, especially, you know, foreign technocrats, when they come to work in a company, they say they want to earn 1 million. And because they know their rights, they stick to 1 million. And because you need them, you actually hire them. So you sign a contract. It's protected by the law. It all really depends on how astute, how strong you are to negotiate for your contract. And I want to say something, because I've interviewed especially young people.
Yeah.
You must understand what you want when you want to go and work somewhere. When you have understood it, you must be bold, and you must stick to your objectives, to what you want.
Yeah.
Every single employer will actually like you if you stick to your position and justify why you think that is what you deserve. They will not let you down just because you said a higher, pay. But they are also going to measure from your intonations, from your resolve, from how you present yourself, whether you deserve that. And once they make a conclusion that you have a special skill and talent, it doesn't matter whether you say 1 million or you say, they would later call you to renegotiate the payment part, show you why the company is not going to be able to pay you 1 million, but it requires you, and they're suggesting you probably take 200,000 in place of the 500,000 or 800,000 you quoted. So young people should learn this. It's when you go simping and looking really desperate and I need it, you can pay me anything, I will work for you. That's not, an employer will think you're not serious at all. Yeah.
So you've mentioned something quite interesting about sometimes the salary can be reduced. You say if you're earning, say, 1 million and this company wants to give you, say, 200,000 Kenyan shillings. In that situation, can an employee go to court and say, my employer gave me a contract, 3-year contract of 800,000 Kenyan shillings. Now they want to reduce it by 200 Kenyan shillings because they want to 3. Are they protected, or that is not a case that will go anywhere?
No, but the point I was raising is that during negotiations and interview, you can quote what you want, but the employer might suggest 200 instead of 1 million. But in a situation where you have been employed and you have a contract for 3 years for 1 million, that is the contract. See, so, and I want just, for the sake of your viewers, all answers in what we do is not in court. So most answers are in how you negotiate with your employer. You can come back, because the employer might come back and tell you, we projected we will bring in 15 million by end of 6 months, but we have brought in 7 million. That's a shortfall of about 8 million less, you see. So what do we do then? So you sit down with your employees and you discuss, and you agree. You can amend your contract depending on what it states. But if he arbitrarily writes a note to you and says, you will be earning 200,000 and not 1 million, I mean, that is a breach of the contract. And obviously it will be reinstated in court, and it would affect the company, because the company assets might be sold just to pay that. But in working civil economies, in good economies, employees do not go to work with a view to how I am going to punish the employer. Employees go to work because they want to build the company so that the company's output is better and so that we can improve the economy of a nation. So when you go there and you've asked for 500,000, 1 million, the issue will be, is the employer signing that contract because he's able? If the answer is yes, then you have a contract. I mean, if after some time they realize they cannot pay you this, I think it is reasonable as an employee to sit down with your employer and listen to what he's saying. And if you don't like it, I mean, obviously you can be like, okay, I think then you can pay me my last 1 million by next month, then I can go. Because in the contract, there's always the 1 month or 1 month notice, or for other contracts, it's 3 months notice, you know. So you tell them, then you pay me my whatever, then I go away. Rather than looking for a route for court. Courts are good, I'm an advocate, and we argue for your rights completely. But as I told you, this is for your viewers, I'm looking at the big picture. Bigger picture means you are in the country to build the economy, not to find ways how to sink one employer and then move to the other one and again sink that one also. And of course, the labor market is very sensitive in terms of employees, and this is important for your viewers, especially the young people. The moment the market starts to imagine that you are that type of person who wants to, you know, jump from one employer to another for purposes of, I mean, we all can change employment, I mean, workplaces, that's not an issue. But the issue is you should not be coming from this to another one, to a third one, to a fourth one, just because you want to get the best and you are not getting it. And so the feeling is you are sinking that next employer. I think the market will learn quickly, and then you probably will not be getting any contract.
So what you're trying to say is some of these issues and problems that may arise and concerns as well are things that can be solved in-house.
Yeah, in fact, when you go to the labor court, the first question that the labor courts are interested in is, have you exhausted all the mediation, reconciliation, and arbitrative mechanisms at the workplace? Because your HR is an important person. You've got to go to him or her and present your case. And he is supposed to quickly set up a committee, HR committee or internal committee or whatever, and they're supposed to look at that issue and say, no, he or she does not deserve this. So let us be fair and probably reinstate her and do this or that. And then if it fails, again I said, you have the labor office. The labor office again has all those rights. If that fails, then you go to the court. I can assure you that once the court listens to your case, having followed all those other, processes, the labor court is likely to be positive about your claim, because you have tried to exhaust it in the lower channels and it has not been resolved.
So are, say, late or economic difficulties an excuse for a late salary payment? And this is in regards to, the legal position that exists when employers choose to pay employees late. Say, I think it's supposed to be around 5/5 of every month. So when an employer tries to exceed that month due to economic difficulties, is that an excuse for late salary payment?
Well, to be honest, in law, no, because you see, as a company, you've got to make all necessary arrangements with your bank, with your financial, partners, to ensure that you've got the basic running funds to run your company. Therefore, it may not be an excuse, but as I said again, a workplace is like a family. I mean, people who are working and those who are managing the workers and the other stakeholders and the shareholders must understand each other, that what's going on in this entity. Are we moving forward or we are stuck? So that you explain to the employees, so that they don't bring this, issue of getting you stuck as an employer. So a relationship is greatest governance crack you can ever have. A relationship with your workers, relationship, the way you interact with them, the way you interact with your immediate superior directors and then supervisors and the workers themselves, I think it's what can sustain a company. If everybody has to operate according to the law, you've paid me on 7th, so I need to go to court. You've paid me on 10th, so I need to go to court. Then there will be no relationship. So I think the best practice in a workplace would be that you actually have a relationship. And therefore, you must be considerate about the workers as well. I mean, they are not just coming to pick money so that it is counted that they have money. They are coming to pick their right, their salary, their money, so that they can, facilitate their bills and their lifestyles. I mean, they have families to take care of probably, or they have other things to do with their money. So the lateness should not be casual. It must be explained to them so that it does not result into a court battle every other time.
Mm-hmm. All right, just hold on to that. I want us to cross over to Uhuru Gardens. My colleague Hibak Said is on standby, of course, to just bring us up to speed with what is happening there in Uhuru Gardens in regards to Labor Day celebrations. Hibak, good morning. How are you this morning? What is the situation like in Uhuru Gardens? Is it filled up yet? Is the celebration about to begin? How is the situation like?
Good morning, and of course people are still streaming in, they're coming in. We're seeing that some of the associations that are here have brought a number of employees who have filled a number of chairs, but however, of course the numbers are less than what one would assume is needed in a situation such as this one. Now, when it comes to the celebrations, we will be expecting the president to be gracing expecting that he might be speaking on some of the things that have been debilitating the employees and employers of this country, including increasing taxes, which has been said, especially in the coming finance bill, to not be increased. And some of those things that he will be addressing include the lack of liquidity. Now, Anne, maybe if you would know the amount of money that Kenyans have in their salaries after deductions is reducing each and every year. Considering that the GDP is doing quite well in the country and we are seeing the bank rates or bank base rates are increasing as well, but that still is not being justified in their pay slip. So we do expect that the president will be speaking on this. As we were here, we have addressed a couple of people who have come here as guests, and of course we have had the National General Secretary of Ketau, Ernest Nadome, who has told us what exactly his union is pushing. Let's take a look at that.
Thank you very much. My name is Ernest Nakenya Nadome. I'm the National General Secretary of Ketau. Ketau stands for Kenya Electrical Trade and Allied Workers Union, where the bulk of the members are drawn from the electricity subsector, namely Kenya Power, Kengen, Geothermal Development Company, and many other and allied firms. At KOTU, I do also serve the position of First Assistant Secretary General. Today marks a very important day for workers, being the Labor Day. It is a day that, as workers, we are supposed to take stock of what has happened for the whole year, and also celebrate the 1 year that we've been working. Whether we are in the celebration mood or not is a different thing altogether. And I'm saying that because of the hard economic times we've had that are attributable to many factors. But all in all, as usual, as the norm, is that workers are always expecting His Excellency the President will be able to announce a wage increase. But this wage increase is only that it's normally not taken in a proper context, because even when the President announces 6%, the 10%, the previous presidents who have been announcing even more than that, this ideally is supposed to uplift the minimum wage. So in this case, the minimum wage, and I think I need to come out very clear, the minimum wage is supposed to affect those people, employees who are in low cadre, who are earning literally very low salary. And this cadre of employees are normally not represented by the union. So you will find that this increment helps those who are not represented by the union, but the takeaway of this is we use it as a basis when we are negotiating for collective bargaining agreement. Even the courts use it when they are making rulings. It's used as a basis when they are now making a decision that When there's a disagreement between the union and management, we move to court. So the courts also use it as a parameter over and above other things on performance of the company. There are things like the economy. So ideally, this is our day, and we hope that there will be good announcement from His Excellency the President. My advice to the Kenyan workers is that we need to soldier on. It's been a difficult year for the last 2 years, but I want to give you comfort, I want to give you an assurance that we will continue as respective trade unions, and let me put that on record. As respective trade unions, we are supposed to be doing our collective bargaining agreements, and you'll be shocked when you go to industrial court. We register. A minimum of 10 CBAs are registered per day. So we do negotiate for the terms and conditions of service of our respective employees. Thank you.
Sir, as a representative of employees, one of the major things that they have been complaining about is, of course, deductions. And maybe this has come in very many conversations. What exactly would they hear this particular year? What do you think the president would say?
It is true, and that's why I said there is quite a number of employees do feel, and which is a fact, that for the last 2-3 years, there have been numerous taxations, and this has impacted negatively on takeaway, on our disposal income. That is why now, in our respective unions, we are supposed to use that. One of the parameters that we use during collective bargaining agreement are cost of living. The cost of living, inflation has really gone high. We also use performance of institutions, in this case the performance of a company. We also use GDP as a parameter, and many other, and also comparables. So ideally, I know because of SHA, because of housing levy, and many other taxes, really the disposable income has come down. But we call upon the respective unions that let us continue pushing, let us continue engaging, let us negotiate for better terms. But even at national level, at the COTU level, we are also now, and we are happy that in this finance bill that is coming, 2025, 2026, there are tax reliefs, and that is really quite positive, and especially for those who are also retiring, that when you are getting, like now I was able to flip through the finance bill, part of it, things like gratuity, retirement benefits, no more taxation, and it has been a big issue where you are taxed when you are employed, and when you also retire, you are taxed. But we are happy that has been removed. So we want the government also to continue. There is also talk of pay as you earn. The government needs to relook at that, reduce that, so that at least we have a reasonable disposable income. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Of course, union representatives are now saying that some of the things, some of the bargaining arguments are going to be relooked, and they're very positive with the coming finance bill 2025-2026, saying that some of the tenements are going to be very good for employees, including gratuity and a relook at payee. Of course, we are still on ground. We're still going to be looking at what exactly is happening. Any news that comes to us comes to you. But for now, it's back to you in studio. Some of the workers' unions and their representatives, what are some of the things that they will be expecting from the COTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli? And of course, they have said that things are a bit tough, but people are looking to soldier on, is what a lot of these union workers are saying, and representatives. And also, they have shown a lot of positivity when it comes to the coming, finance bill 2025-2026, touching on gratuity and payee. But all of this is going to be a mystery to you as it is to me. We are going to be touching base on some of the things that have been, said in the studio, and some of the things that will be said here. And unless you have any other question, of course, in the Muli, we will be giving it back to you.
Thank you so much, Hibak Said. Hibak is live at Uhuru Gardens. The celebrations on Labor Day is currently ongoing, and of course we'll be sure to keep you up to date as the morning progresses in regards to that. We still have Wakili Ishmael Nyaribo in studio with us, talking to us about what you need to know, how you need to protect yourself, when you need to protect yourself, and why you need to protect yourself at work. And of course, before we crossed over to Uhuru Gardens, Wakili, we're talking about this in-house agreement between employer and employee in case where there is an economic difficulty and the employer is not able to pay the employee in time. But what happens when now the employer is in fear of retaliation, that maybe they might say 1, 2, 3, but then the employer might want to tell them, no, we are doing away with you because we cannot sustain you here.
Yeah. You see, like I have said, everything really depends on the relationship dynamics. If the relationship at workplace is mutual, is cordial, is going on, there is absolutely no need for anybody to fear about the parameters of law, or when I go to court, or I might be victimized. If the workplace relationship is cordial, then the employer is not thinking on how to take advantage of you. Then the employee is not looking at how to run to court to protect himself, because the relationship is cordial, the contract of employment is respected, isn't it? And in the contract of employment, there is a clause that says, how can I terminate your work, or how can you terminate my work? It's there in the contract. In fact, before, this is where you may need lawyers, but before you sign a contract, you need to run it through your lawyer friend and confirm that there is a termination clause. And also there's a clause that says, what will happen if we disagree? So there's a clause there saying dispute resolution. There's another one there saying termination. And I have seen contracts that actually don't have a termination clause. And so an employer, recklessly, if I may say, binds himself to employ somebody forever. And where there is no termination clause, in some cases even there is no contract. And when there is no contract, it means you are considered to be working on month-to-month basis. And an employer can come up and say, now from next month, I would like to sever the relationship with you. And then you start wondering, I have worked for this guy 10 years down the line. Now he's just firing me tomorrow. You need to sign contracts, and they have to have those, But you say, what happens where the employer is worried about, reprisal or somebody taking advantage? And again, the law always is supreme. The law protects both the employer and the employee. Then if you seek recourse to the law, as I said, and yet the economic conditions are so bad, they cannot sustain the intended contract and the good facilities and all these kind of things, then what do you do? I don't think I have an answer, to be honest with you. The answer is based on the relationship between worker and the employer. And that relationship, in my view, should always be enhanced by good working conditions, by treating people correctly. Both the employer should treat his employees correctly, but the employees must also treat their employer correctly, with decorum. Let me tell you, law is existing to keep order. Before there's a dispute, you actually don't think about the law. You come in the morning, you say hi to your supervisor, and you get to work. But when you are working and you realize you don't have the work tools, probably you are a farm, farm hand. You work in the farms. You don't have gloves. You don't have any gear. They give you nothing. They probably give you a stick and tell you use the stick to go and till the land. That's when you start seeing that there is discrimination. That's when you remember the law. But where the relationship is such that the employer provides everything that is needed for the employee to work, you will not think about the law. So I think that people should have a cordial relationship, and employers who intend to take in people must first and foremost ensure that they have acted in accordance with the Employment Act and other laws to ensure that when people come in, they are not going to be hurt, they are not going to be discriminated, their health is considered, and the work hours is allowed. You don't employ two people and have them work from 6 to 8 in the night. The international labor treaties don't allow that. The labor law, the Employment Act in Kenya does not allow that. The workplace hours is limited to 8. If there is extra, then you have to be paid for that. So these things must be prepared in advance by the employer. But once you have gone there as an employee, and you realize you are the only one working there, and you agree with them, with the employee, as many young people, because the energy is still high, and you're like, no, what's the big problem? I can work up to 8. I don't have any job. Then 2 years down the line, you realize I'm actually being overworked. All you have to do is to tell the employer that I have worked with you for so long. I think I overlooked this. Now, going forward, you need to compensate me for the extra hours. If he refuses, because they say in Swahili, mjinga akierefuka mwerefu ako matatani. So, if he fires you because of that realization, you will go to court and he will compensate you for the previous extra hours you worked in the company for 2 years. Yeah.
Now, you're talking about sometimes these employers, they shoot themselves in the feet by employing people on permanent basis. But let's talk about the rise of casual and contract work. So do you think that labor laws are keeping up with this shift, from permanent now to contracts and just casual contracts rather?
Yeah, I think now this youth call them the gig.
The gigs.
The short term, the temporary. And I think that is where, by the way, most economies, that's where we're headed, because there's not enough labor market to employ all people who are educated or skilled for a certain thing or a certain activity. So you find that you may want to have a person working for you for 2 days to clean up your house and arrange your rooms and everything, and then you pay them for that and they go away. I don't think the Kenyan labor law has actually developed to that space. Our laws have not properly, yes, they look at, that is in the class of casual workers. But you will be surprised that that is not, because if you look at the digital economy, for example, somebody is going to do an article for you, or he's going to do a proposal or a write-up for you. You don't call that a casual worker. It's not your worker anyway. It's just like a relationship of contract basis. He's working for you to do a certain activity, and once that is done, then you go away. I think our laws should be improved on that end to ensure that the moment you engage a person, that is a contract that should be respected immediately. But it's not just on the line of a contract per se. It is a contract, but coming in the sphere of employment, because even employers can hire bloggers or vloggers for that matter. Though, how do you call that? Is that an employee, or that is just a contract and go away? So I think our laws now should develop to achieve what we call the digital economy, so that they capture those. For example, young people want to come in and teach you about cryptocurrency or cyber crime, the way it is done. It's assumed that the police are the ones who actually have monopoly of the cyber crime. There are many young people who understand how cyber crime happens, how hacking happens, how fraud happens online, and a company may want to hire such people to come and teach them how to prevent hacking or fraud activities from happening. So a gig, as we say. So our laws, I think this is an emerging trend in the labor market that our rules need to look at and tighten the protection of the employee as well as the employer.
So do you see this as a way of these employees now, or employer rather, trying to cushion themselves from the economic times by just employing people on contracts as compared to employing them on permanent basis?
To be honest, I think this is really the trend. If you look at what's happening in the advanced economies, contracts is the basis for working with anybody. And this laissez-faire old mentality where you go hang up your coat in the office and walk all over town and come back at 4 p.m. to pick your jacket, and then on 30th you are expecting to see money in your bank account. I think that has been removed largely by many. Even in Kenya, you saw that every other employee, even in government offices now, they need to sign a performance contract. Why? Because we realized that once people had come to work on an employment letter, they would actually misuse their work hours, they would do their own things, and then the burden becomes too heavy for the employer, because they are not having enough production of what they ought to produce. They are not having, you cannot see results in a particular industry or company, and companies keep on closing. So yes, contracts, you may give it that interpretation that, oh, maybe now companies are trying to cushion themselves against retaining an employee for so long who is not productive, or in case they want to avoid redundancy, they want to give a contract of 2 years, they see how a person is working, and then whatever interpretation you give it, in reality, that is the trend in the global market. You get employed under contract for a certain period for a certain activity. And if you are again performing, you will realize you might actually extend your contract for a whole 10 years.
Even as you're talking about employee rights, of course, I'm sure there is employer rights as well. What are they, and at what point can the employer now seek legal action against an employee?
Yeah, now those are two major questions. One, employee rights, you know, I mean, you have a right to salary, for example. Yes. That is the major one we all think about, but there are several others underlying, I mean, beneath the salary, there are several others. For example, you have a right to best treatment at your workplace. How are you treated? You have a right to be treated with dignity. You know, you are a human being who is dignified. You are working for the company to produce goods or services in that company. So you have got to be treated fairly. You have a right not to be discriminated. You know, in case, for example, you're a lady, how should you be handled? You have a right not to be handled differently from others. No one should discriminate against your sexual identity. Now, in other countries, you will realize they have several other rights, but besides that, you have a right to be treated equally. The way they treat your colleague is the way you should be treated. So you asked about there are people who are earning 200,000 and others are earning 100,000. If they are in the same bracket, you realize that actually you can make it as a claim. If you, for example, you both have been employed in February and you both have a degree, diploma in media, and yet you've come in at the same time and you probably have the same experience, let me say that. I mean, if you left school at the same time and you've come to work and then you realize that this counterpart is earning 300,000, but you're earning 140. Now that's it's a major issue, because if it is actually confirmed, then that is a malpractice in the sense that the employees are treated unequally. There is inequality. So that is actually wrong. And then, of course, you have a right to woodworking conditions, a right to working gear, for example. I mean, if they told us to come here to work and then we don't have the mics and we don't have the table and gadgets to work with, you know, so you have a right to work gear. And if you're working in the other unskilled industries, like I said, you may need the gloves, you need a axe, slasher, you know, all these kind of things. They have got to be given to you for you to work. And there are a whole host of many other rights, actually. Yeah. I'm just mentioning what roughly would benefit your viewers for this debate, for this discussion.
Yeah. And you know, the question was also about the employer rights, because now we are talking about employee rights.
Yes.
Employer has a right, you know. They can just sit there and say that, no, we want to take this employee to court.
Yes.
So at what point now do they come in and say, this is now above us, we are going to court?
So most employers, by the way, they protect themselves through the contract or a letter of appointment. When they send you a letter, they will state right there, and these are the rights of an employer, that you will work between 8:30 to 5. Already that's a right they have. If you give them less, if you come in at 9 or 9:30, they have a right to write a warning letter to you, and they have a right actually to dismiss or terminate your contract. That is a right they have. So, you know, there's something called confidentiality, for example, at your workplace. It's all there in the agreement, in the employment contract, and they say that all the information at this workplace to protect the company from, you know, industry prejudice or unfair competition. They insist that you will keep confidential the matters you see here, and that you will not discuss them with competitors or with other business partners who may unfairly use that kind of data. So they've already protected themselves that way. But so the employer has a right to terminate your work if you have misconducted yourself. For example, if you are insubordinate, and it's right there in the contract and in the act as well. So there are those rights that employer can also terminate your work. You must give your 8 hours to your employer. They don't belong to you. In fact, The other terms used loosely is that you would be stealing from your employer. If you come into work at 9 and you leave at 4, you have stolen 1 hour in the morning and you have stolen another hour in the afternoon. So they have rights, yes, they have actually rights as well to terminate your work. And not only that, they also have a right to discipline you. They have a right to form a disciplinary, committee and listen to your all, whatever you are saying. And they have a right actually to discipline you, including you paying a fine to the employer.
Right now there is this debate. Last year, the minimum wage was increased by 6%. And right now, KOTU sector in general wants it reviewed upwards by at least 22.5%. Do you think it's achievable?
No, it is not achievable. And some of these are political comments KOTU will make and other unions, so the employers can imagine that they are being represented very well. I mean, when you look at minimum wages I've seen minimum wages for unskilled and skilled labor coming to people earning about 9,000, averagely. People earning 9,000, 14,000 maybe for some. And you're talking about 6%, even 6%. It's also, you can't imagine, because 10,000, you talk about 6%, how much is that? So 10,000, so you're talking about 6% will come to about, I don't know, about, it's not even 600 shillings, isn't it? So can you imagine, you are being increased to 600 shillings. I mean, honestly, that is your matatu fare to Mlolongo and back. And in a month, it is actually more, because if you're spending about 100 shillings, you will have about 3,000 going to fare alone, and somebody is increasing 600 shillings. I'm not blaming the employer. And I am not saying it is wrong for KOTU to suggest 20%. Yes, you need to, in fact, 20 or even 50%, so that people who are earning 10 can earn 20,000. And we understand this economy. 20,000 is still not a lot of money, really. I mean, even living on basic, decent life where you pay about 2,000 rent, wherever you can get such a house. The problem is not that. Again, the problem is, where is the economy that can sustain that job that you need to increase 20%? So what KOTU should do is to, first of all, address these issues. The earlier panelists were discussing, Honorable Sosion and his colleague, they were talking about cartels in the labor market. They should be removed. And I think this is where KOTU should focus on, to ensure there are no cartels, to ensure that they are advising the state correctly in terms of the plight of workers, but also in terms of what is causing the economy to go into slump. Is it people, or is it managers of the people? Is it government, or is it the populace? Who is actually really making our economy to suffer this kind of downtimes? Who is destroying the economy? Is it people, or is it the managers? If the economy is good, I can assure you, and if all the money in the country were put in the right use, there will be enough to sustain companies and to attract more investment into Kenya, so that now you have companies that can actually pay you 30,000 as a minimum pay. So yeah, anybody can say what they want to say about this is what we want, and of course the president will come and say, no, we will give you 7%. And it will look like there is an improvement. Instead of 6, it has come to 7. But this is all, I think, gerrymandering and playing with the psychology of workers. The issue here is people, we should strengthen our economy so that an increment of 15% every year can be feasible and is a possibility.
I want us to go back to the issue of court cases. And what trends perhaps have you seen come up in courts? What are people coming to report, in regards to their workplaces? Is it unfair compensation? Is it poor working conditions? What are they coming really? This is to employees both and employers as well.
Employers normally really come to court because probably they are dragged. They've been dragged to court by unions. You saw the KQ case, for example, some years back. You saw Telkom when they were, laying off people, when they were, disconnecting from Airtel. something, it was another name then. So employers really, their going concern is to produce and issue and supply to the market what the market wants. But employees must understand also, because this is important for them, it's their day, that first of all, by the way, we don't see many Kenyans going to court to argue that my working conditions are bad. Many don't realize that they are working. We have many sufferings from where we come from as children of this land, that when you get opportunity to work, you work in the conditions in which you find yourself. So for that reason, I think the employer has a field day. But when it comes to you, one, don't pay them their salary. Two, you fire them. This now becomes an issue. And then this is where when you go to the lawyer, he asks you how you are working, what were your working time, what was your working gear, what were you given to help you do this and that, and how many holidays, how many days did you go on leave? Then you start to realize, oh, my rights were abused. So in that case, I think what we see in court actually is when people have been fired and when the employer has refused to pay the salary. These are the two major ones. When you're fired, then you realize, was it fair? Was I treated fairly, or I was victimized? I was picked out of the 10 so that I'm fired just because my superior asked for a favor from me. That's where you will find ladies are saying, oh, he asked for a sexual favor, or men will say, this woman used to harass me, he wanted a favor from me. These things now come up, and they are so remote, but they are being propped up so that they can support the fact that my firing was actually discriminative and was not fair. So for me, what I have seen majorly, it is the salary and the unlawful termination. The termination may not be unlawful, but of course, you can't go to court for any other reason other than if the termination was unlawful. So you've got to craft those facts that show that the termination was actually unlawful. But if, I can assure you, if you give Kenyans job, and like I said, you maintained a cordial relationship, there is not one we have seen who will go to court and say, my working conditions are bad. Except, let me say this, except there are these industries, such as hotel and what can we say, the dock workers, in the port. There are those who actually literally rely on gears to work. But even those, I have not seen people who go to court to say that I am working and I have not been given my gear. But wait until you fire them. They will say, first of all, I was never given a gear, so I worked for 10 years without a gear. So I think majorly it's about cordial relationship at work. Then provide what they need to have in order to facilitate them to work. But employers can actually sit pretty. Nobody's going to sue them that you did not give me a pen to use. In fact, most of us will go and just pick a pen from the street and continue working. And you are using your own pen to do work for your employer. But wait until you fire that employee, then he will remember, I used to buy my pens and you never used to give them to me. So yeah, I think, and this should be something positive for Kenyan employers, because they have nice people working for them. Kenyans are interested in working, except for the economy that sometimes is sabotaged by the managers. I think that Kenyans are ready to work, and they are not really critical about whether you give them some facilities to work. But that is not to say that the employer should not provide the work gear and should not provide, the facilities needed. I only answered your question. What are the issues we see in our courts? And majorly it is when you are fired or when your salary has been retained by your employer.
But if you're talking about most Kenyans not coming to court to complain about poor working conditions, we see this mostly with the healthcare workers, of course, when they go on those go-slows at the Ministry of Health or at the SHA offices. But this is not being addressed more times. We see them there every now and then when they go to the streets. It's always about poor working conditions and, of course, poor remuneration. Then if people like this in this cadre, the issues are not being addressed, then how protective is the law, in regards to just addressing poor working conditions at the places of work? Yeah,
I mentioned actually that, there are industries that are, like the hotels are said, look at the police, you know, if you work without weapons and you are told to go to stop a crowd from rioting and you don't have that gear. So it is true, and you have now mentioned the medical workers. But I will tell you, medical workers come in to complain about work conditions, and I agree with you, but underlying that, I can assure you, is the pay is low and the pressure of work is so high. So they are motivated primarily, and I hope they don't roast me for nothing, primarily they are complaining that the level of payment is so low. You've gone to hospitals, you find where there are no beds, totally, and the patients are being brought into the hospital and there are no beds completely. What happens? Most of these medical workers actually, they still assist. You know, the people put down their shuka and the patients lie on that. But you asked whether there is a law that, of course, our laws protect these workers. And they actually encourage this kind of striking as a right so that their plight can be addressed. But the issue is not the law, because the law allows them to picket so that they can be heard. The law also directs that there should be good facilities in any medical facility. There should be good working conditions. The law provides for that. I told you the problem. One, how is the economy doing? Two, those who are managing the economy, once some income has come to Kenyatta National Hospital, for example, how is it managed by the director and his accountants? Is it utilized towards making sure that the workers are properly paid and that the wards are clean and there are people cleaning the whole hospitals? This is not a question of law. This is a question of who is managing the income, the funds of that particular entity. And when you see, there is what I always keep calling intellectual manipulation. When you are in a position, you're managing this medical facility, or you are managing this hotel, or you are managing this university, or you are managing this entity. If you decide to manipulate people and misdirect the funds that were supposed to be used for better working conditions, you take them into constructing another, you know, a hall. For some reason, it might be necessary, but the funds for that hall were not really allocated for. You have removed them from where you're supposed to be improving the facilities condition. So what happens? That is not law. That is just mismanagement at the higher level. So that has nothing to do with the law. The law provides that the medical practitioners and the hotel industries, the hotel workers, the skilled and unskilled laborers should be provided for in terms of their working conditions.
So still on the issue of strikes and go-slows, we've seen so many of this in a number of sectors, but what is the legal line between now a legal strike and an illegal one? Because we've seen some saying that, oh, that strike is illegal and that one is legal, you should not be in the streets.
You see, let me be honest, loosely, all strikes are legal. All strikes, all picketing is actually provided for in the law.
Yes.
In terms of administrative management of a strike, this is where the police come in and a public order, you know, like the police come in and say, look, I mean, we can't have, doctors are striking on Kenyatta Avenue, teachers are on Moi Avenue, and the lawyers are on Kimathi Street. And, you know, you can't have that kind of disorder. For that reason, the police normally say that, look, so that we know what's going on, just notify us and go on and do your thing. But if you do a strike without notifying the authorities, then that's where the problem is. But otherwise, you can't say that there is a strike that is illegal. It's a question of informing the authorities that you cannot occupy Moi Avenue because maybe another team is actually going to picket on that road. Yes.
Let's shift gears to now labor migration laws. Does the law guarantee protection for such job seekers, you know, under such initiatives? Because we've seen people being scammed because maybe they were looking for jobs under the state and under other things and other people, you know. So does the law guarantee protection of such job seekers in terms of just labor migration laws?
First of all, international labor law, under the International Labor Organization, there are treaties that allow countries to exchange their labor, you know, workforce. And there's something also you need to understand about nation relationships, nation-to-nation relationship. I mean, there's a relationship we have with South Africa, for example, with Uganda, with Ethiopia. You know, there are countries which we do not have relationship with completely. And if you go to that country, we will not even know you've gone to that country because you probably go to a friendly nation and then you, on your own, clandestinely visit a country that Kenya does not have an embassy or even a consulate in that country. So if that happens, it can become very difficult for the country to discover you, even for your family to help you, because you're in a country where nobody knows. But you asked whether the law protects this migration. 100% yes, because even when you talk about going to US and all these statements from Trump, I mean, saying we will, you know, send you back, do this and that, that is a statement in jest of the law. The law provides for, even when you go to another country, which is a friendly nation, how should you be treated? If you claim that you had to run away from Nairobi because of persecution, all you need to do is to say, I have come because I am persecuted, so I need protection. So the international law on labor practices protects you if you decide to go and work in Uganda. But you see now, the way that host country will treat you will depend on the strength of their labor law locally. When most people come here, I mean in Kenya, they are fully protected because that is what our Employment Act says. That is what our labor law is. We implement all international conventions on labor, the UN Convention on Labor Practices, and we implement that in the country. So when you go to Saudi, for example, and we have a relationship with Saudi, the issue here should be, and you talked about scamming. I mean, there is no law that is recognizing the scamming aspect, but of course, if fraudulent means are used to entice you to go and work out in the Middle East, for example, and you don't report nowhere. If you don't report anywhere in the embassy in Saudi or here in Nairobi, you don't report. You just went secretly and you started working. And then when there are problems, then you send, you know, alarm to your family. And when they look at the list of people who have traveled to Saudi for a job, they don't find your name. So we must look at this issue of order in terms of how you plan to go out of your nation, out of your country, and which is the nearest embassy in where you're going to work. These are very important issues. Some of us just want to run away from our friends and home and want to resurface somewhere in Switzerland and show how we are now big and all that. I think that's where you find actually that many of our young people start suffering and they start actually being mistreated and harassed in the foreign nations. I think that when you want to go and work, you must follow the law. You must show your name that here I am. This is the reason why I am going. Many of us travel out of the country because we are visiting. Then instead of visiting, you actually realize you have gone to work and nobody knows you're working. So when there is a problem, you realize that now I have to tell people in Kenya. And then you tell them, who are you? What did you go to do? The government does not know. You never informed the local embassy that you are actually in that country. So those are the issues. But in terms of whether the law protects migration, we have a whole office here in Nairobi that protects, migrants. If you want to travel to another country to work there and you have the paperwork, we have a whole set of administrative institutions that can actually protect you. But if you sneak to go and work through sneaking, then it becomes very volatile. I mean, nobody would know, but most of these people who live, and we have so many Kenyans actually who work all over the world, from South Korea, North Korea, USA, Europe, then you come over to here in Africa, South Africa, here in Uganda, Egypt. There are so many Kenyans, but they are documented. And that's what makes the difference. But if you go secretly without following the law, then you disappear and go to a country and work clandestinely. You see, the labor law does not protect you. Now, what protects you could be the refugee law or the handling of foreign nations. In those countries, they might be having their own pieces of legislation. But the moment you look for a job in an international destination, and you process your paperwork correctly, have an employment letter, you are 100% protected by the international law on labor practices.
Perhaps is this a reason why we see this trend of people going there to work for countries like Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and we report about them being mistreated, you know, they're living in very poor working conditions, they're emaciated for some. Is it because some went through the back door and not through the, you know, the legal frameworks that exist for such migrations? Does it really qualify to interpret it like that?
Yeah, I am not expert on that. I would be, and I know it's a sensitive issue because there are people who have been killed out in the Middle East and other countries. So I cannot be very specific about them. But what I want to tell you is if a country has a relationship with another one, it cannot butcher people, you know. It cannot just kill people, you know, a country, it cannot. I mean, what you are asking is a question of something happens in a home. And when you go to discover who is that who has been killed in a home or on the road, then you discover it's a Kenyan. When you look at the paperwork, how he left Kenya, he left Kenya to go and work in Qatar, but you actually find him in Saudi. Then the Kenyan embassy in Saudi does not know that this person is here. So I think there should be a collaboration between the youth who want to go and work outside and the government. They should properly document they are going out. They should inform their families who is taking it. Because we have cases where youth are deceived that they are going to work in the Middle East, and they were found in places like Syria when there was that war in Syria.
Yeah.
And you ask them how? Oh, I was told, I went, when we reached Libya, we boarded another flight. I found myself in a country I don't know, and I was given a gun. So when you're leaving this country, I think it is important that you inform your family. There are families who don't know where the young ones are, by the way, because they were promised some jobs, and all of a sudden you come to hear that they have resurfaced, now they are in Iraq. Oh, now what are you doing in Iraq? Oh, I am doing some job, you know. So I think the most important thing, if you want to be brought into the highway of the law, you must report correctly and do your paperwork correctly before you move out of the country to go and work elsewhere.
All right. Now, Wakili, maybe you could tell us if at all the informal sector is regulated. You know, there was a discussion to formalize this sector, of course, to extend legal protections to these workers. Is there any legal protection that exists for those in the informal sector?
When you're talking about informal sector, I mean, what's informal? You're talking about the Kikomba artisans and...
Yes.
Yeah, but those ones, they are called unskilled labor. And unskilled labor is protected under the Employment Act. I mean, they are considered because even the people work in the farmhand, let's say, I don't know where you place the home workers, you know, like the men and women who work in the home state.
The casual workers?
Yes. As casual workers, because they have not signed any contract, you know. The law provides anybody who works for you without a contract or a letter, as long as that person can demonstrate that they worked for you, the law considers them to be working on month-to-month basis. The period within which you have employed them is month to month. Therefore, even them, by the way, even them, you will have to give them notice that they will go away in that 1 month. You have to give them 1 month notice so that it can go. I believe the laws might not be, they are not fastened correctly yet, but there is a level of protection because they are mentioned in the Employment Act.
There is a question here for you, and it's from Wanjiru. She's asking, women in the workplace still face challenges. What does the law currently provide in terms of maternity rights, sexual harassment protections, and pay equity?
Actually, she needs to refer to the Employment Act again. I will give her the section in a little while. The Employment Act does not tolerate mistreatment on the basis of pregnancy, for example. You have every right. In fact, now most companies are implementing the maternity leave for men as well. They may not call it maternity leave, but they're implementing it for men as well, because the law is not saying that the child bringing up is just for the woman. It's for everybody. So yeah, you have a right to go to maternity. I think most companies implemented it for 3 months. Others extend it to 4 months. You have a right. It is stipulated there in the Employment Act. You're talking about sexual harassment. You need to read the act and at the same time look at human resource organizations, and also look at FIDA, for example, Kenya Federation of Women Lawyers, and a few others you can Google. The law protects female employees from being exploited by their male counterparts. And I'm not done.
Okay.
I just want to add a rider. Their assumption, and I'm not trying to demean what she's asking, but there's a rider here. Harassment of sexual nature because of sexual orientation. You're talking about women and sexual harassment, but what about persons who are not fully men and they're not fully women, and they're working, they work they exist in the workplace. Are they going to the female bathroom or they are going to the male bathroom? Are you not harassing them by not providing special facilities for them? So the harassment sometimes is perceived more than real. No one ever in this country today should mistreat a woman at the workplace on the basis of sexual orientation or seek sexual favors because you're male. Any woman who allows this to happen actually is on her own. I mean, you should refuse it, and if the individual persists, you must bring him to court and, of course, parade him wherever you have to parade him. But there is no law today or practice in law or practice in labor market that allows the man to dominate the woman for sexual favors. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Wanjiri, for that question. This one is your namesake, anaitwa Dennis Nyaribo. And he's asking, let's be real about the minimum wage. And is the current minimum wage legally enforceable or merely symbolic in many parts of the country?
Thank you, Dennis. Again, that's what I said, is the economy able? Let me tell you, let's take it from home. It is straightforward to him. I can tell him it's not sustainable. Yeah. It is sustainable in some industries and it is not in some. Take it from home setup. There are people who pay house workers maybe 10,000, and others maybe 20, depends on who it is, 30 also.
Yeah.
But there are homes that will actually pay 5,000, isn't it? That is a bad practice. But the person paying 5,000 is actually earning 25,000. So if you take such a person to the court and you say, I'm being paid 5,000. All the employer needs to come to court and demonstrate is that we made a request to work with him or her and offered 5 because from my pay slip, here it is, I earn 25,000. I mean, the court will reason and listen to it. There's a case in Uganda where a judge had gone to do a doctorate degree in UK and decided to go with a lady to help her at home. and I think the lady was not paid, I think, was paid either less or not paid at all. And that judge has been convicted in the UK for bad labor practices. She's a judge, forgotten the name, but it's all there on the media. So why? Because when you want your rights, stick to them. But I also suggest to your viewers that if you are going for employment, discuss with your employer what you want. If she or he is not able to provide what you want, then back off. But also as an employer, if somebody comes to you and you want to give them 10,000, stick to that. And if it is not workable because of economic conditions, you sit them down and tell them, in a month, I have to lay you off because I am not able to sustain what? To sustain the payment. My economic conditions have changed. I think In Africa, I can speak freely that employees will agree to such negotiations. Yeah.
And what we're seeing right now is the motorcade of the president. He's making his way to Uhuru Gardens right now, where the celebrations of Labor Day is currently underway. And of course, Prime Cabinet Secretary is also there as well, among other dignitaries. Once again, this is a motorcade of, there he is, President William Ruto, making his way to the podium right there at Uhuru Gardens. Of course, to address Kenyans, we can also see the COTU Secretary General there, Francis Atwoli, Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi, and of course, the Labour CS, Alfred Mutua, is also there, among other leaders. There is the Public Service Cabinet Secretary Geoffrey Ruku, who is also there. They're making their way to the podium, even as Kenyans anticipate what the president is going to address. And if at all there are going to be promises this year that maybe will be achievable in regards to just ensuring that the minimum wage is increased from the promise that he made last year in regards to the 6%. And now that the COTU Secretary General is championing for a 22.5% increase. Thank you so much, Wakili Ishmael Nyaribo, advocate of the High Court of Kenya, for making time for us and for just educating us on the labor laws and what
I'm
we need
looking
to
for
know.
the deputy president in this side.
All right,
He should be receiving the head of state. That's just my other concern.
Yes.
It's not politics day, but we'll have to check on that.
Maybe ours is just to wait and see whether he'll come or not. But right now, let's cross over to Uhuru Gardens and hand over to our colleague who is there.
Thank you.
Nitaomba sote sasa tuwe wima kwa wimbo wa taifa wa Jamhuri ya Kenya na wimbo wa Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki. Wimbo wa taifa. Nitaomba tuwe watulivu. Tutaongozwa kwa maombi na Shehe Munshid Hassan na kisha Askofu Jonathan Kabiru, ACK Diocese of Nairobi. Tunaomba.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we raise our hands in prayer for the President and his family. Oh Allah, guide them to righteousness and success. Grant them strength to serve our beloved nation and bless their efforts, health, and sustenance. Oh Allah, on this day that honors work and effort, we ask you to protect all the workers in this blessed country in all sectors, whether in factories, farms, schools, or in any other field. Bless their work and grant them success and progress in their lives. Make their efforts in your way, provide them with lawful sustenance and protect them from hardship and calamity. Oh Allah, we ask you to bless all the leaders of this country, from the government officials to the leaders of workers in all fields. Grant them wisdom, justice, and success in working for the welfare of the nation and its people. Protect them from all harm and evil. We plead to you, Allah, to make our country safe and stable, protect it from all trials and calamities, guide us to work hard for the betterment of our nation, and grant us peace, security, and prosperity. Let this country be a beacon of peace and progress in the world. Finally, O Allah, send blessings, peace, and mercy upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, companions, and all those who follow them in righteousness until the day of judgment. Ameen, Ya Arhamar Rahimin.
In the name of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Almighty God, creator and maker of the universe, we come before thee with thanksgiving and worship to glorify